That's just the nature of this phenomenon. You question your own sanity.
Welcome, everyone, to We're Not Alone, streaming here on Queen City News Plus. I'm your host, Meg Beeler. Many of you who know me know that I'm a pilot of over 40 years. I love aviation. I'm infatuated with the wild blue yonder, and that includes UAPs, UFOs, and all that good stuff of high strangeness. Special guest today is an acclaimed filmmaker who specializes in all sorts of productions, very well accomplished. Darcy Weir joins us from Canada. Darcy, a very, very talented filmmaker with an interesting history with UFOs, and I can't wait to hear all about that. Joining us from Canada, welcome, Darcy.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Mickey.
Glad to have you here. Excited to tell your story. I'm going to just give a little bit of background about your bio. You've been on a mission to bring the world's most captivating mysteries, UFOs, UAPs, ETs, cryptids, and more, into the global spotlight through your talents as a filmmaker. Goodness, you've been at this 13 years, but you have produced a remarkable 20 productions. Wow. 18 feature-length documentaries, 2 docuseries, each accessible on Amazon Prime and Apple. And your goal is to shine a new light on these topics of high strangeness and making the information about them more accessible to the general public. Darcy, how in the world did you get started in this? Because you've done a lot of work.
Yeah, I started making films in this sort of documentary genre of UFOs, UAPs, and the occult, I would say, back in 2012. So it's been over 20 years. The very first time I published a film, it was just on YouTube in the 4x3 days. And I've loved the journey. I've loved, taking this adventure and finding out more about the different stories, the different experiences, and the phenomenon of UFOs and possibly this non-human intelligence that's interacting with our planet.
I wonder where the curiosity came from. Did you have an experience or an encounter or something that prompted this?
I saw two things in my life that I thought were anomalous. I was 21 when I saw the very first thing. I was just on a flight and I was looking out the window and I was thinking about UFOs and how it'd be so cool to sort of see one. And I looked up towards the stars, even though it was broad daylight, and I saw what looked like a cube, like a metallic sort of cube object. And I was a little startled. Um, I reached for a camera, and this thing kind of just drifted above the fuselage of the plane and never caught sight of it again. I was a little bit freaked out. The people sitting beside me thought I was probably mental, but I think that's just the nature of this phenomenon. You question your own sanity, but I'm a normal guy, pulled down a job, got a mortgage, got a wife and kid, and I'm just fascinated by all this stuff.
So I need to ask you, you said you were thinking about how cool it would be to see something, and then you see the cube.
hmm
Did you manifest this?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't follow any protocols. I'm not like meditating for this to happen to me. I'm more interested in the subject. And when I caught sight of that, and then when I was about 28, many years later, living in Australia and shooting a film there, I at night I saw another object that while my friend and I were walking to get a slice of pizza, it just kind of went from over our heads in our eye line to over the horizon and zigzagged. It didn't burn up. It didn't get brighter. It was just like a sort of solid orb-like light. And that was the second time I saw something, and I was not thinking of, seeing something at that time. It just kind of happened. So I don't know if that was some kind of experimental craft, but usually that's not what a jet moves like.
No, of course not. Now, when you saw these, especially the second one, did you get the creeps? Did it scare you at all, or were you just fascinated?
Well, I asked the guy who was walking with me, "Did you see that?" And this guy named Stephen Hockley, British fellow, housemate of mine, and he said, "Yeah, I saw that, and it was weird, and we just kind of moved on."
Wow.
But yeah, obviously, it's a strange thing to see these, but who knows what's out there, right?
Well, you have done so many movies, programs, documentaries. You've researched UFOs, UAPs, and high strangeness. What is some of the weirdest things that you have come across in your productions or your research or just by talking to people? Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I mean, I've covered a whole gambit of different stories that have come out of the UFO arena, let's say community and phenomenon. The first story I ever covered was about underground bases, a guy named Phil Schneider. Uh, Supposedly, the rumor was that he was murdered for being a whistleblower and talking about government special access programs and, you know, building of these underground structures to house clandestine research and possibly UFO tech. Um, I went from that and kind of started doing the abduction phenomenon. And I did a documentary later on with Stanton Friedman, Dean Alioto, a fellow filmmaker friend of mine. Um, it had Kathleen Martin, who's also an experiencer, and family by blood of Barney Hill and Betty Hill. So we talked about that abduction case, and we also interviewed Travis Walton for that. I think the abduction phenomenon is something that is pretty strange, right? Although it's becoming more normalized as a conversation in the UFO community now. When it first came out, it was like people were okay with talking about UFOs in the sky and strange occurrences with that, but they weren't very comfortable with the idea that people might have been on board these UFOs or taken without consent, which fast forward to last year or this year, early in January, I actually released a docu series called Pascagoula 73 with Philip Mantle, a British researcher who's written about 5 different books about Calvin Parker and Charlie Hickson, who are the Mississippi men that were abducted in 1973 on the Pascagoula River. That's a 4-part docu series, an hour each episode, and it's also released as a 3-hour single documentary on Amazon Prime and such. But um, yeah, I had no idea. I remember hearing about that case when I was much younger. I'm 40 years old now, believe it or not. And I was like, this is wild. These guys were fishing and they were taken. And, fast forward to last year, I actually got to sit down and make this story of something that I was enamored with much earlier in my life.
Some people hear this and they just don't believe any of it. And you're the filmmaker and you're hearing these stories, you're researching it. At any point, did you feel, well, this just is crazy? Or did you know in your heart that this was true? How did you process it?
I am skeptical of some stories, and I have published a story called Dark Alliance where I talked to people who believed that that was all a hoax. It was like this manufactured story that was made to really enamor and attract attention away from other stories in the community. And so I believe that there is untruths out there, and you're always going to have that with every community in the world. I mean, whether it's religion or politics, there's always going to be some people that are out there to tell some untruths. But with the abduction phenomenon, I think that there's so many credible cases. Obviously, there are cases that are manufactured as well. And when you hear about the Air Force getting involved in investigating, you hear about uh, police detectives taking notes that seem to follow the same story, and the story never changes. There's trace evidence, like sometimes wounds, scoop marks on the victims, like DNA or flesh has been taken from them during the encounter. Um, and these can be compared to wounds from many other abductees throughout history. Sometimes they're puncture marks or they're scoop marks where they've actually taken out flesh. You start to think that there's something here. Um, and with the Pascagoula case, with Travis Walton's case, with Betty and Barney Hill, there was a lot of evidence like that. You know, the Air Force got involved. Project Blue Book was involved for the earlier cases. And then for Pascagoula, the Air Force, Keesler Air Force Base got involved with researching what happened to those men. Um, Although at first they told the men to buzz off because Project Blue Book was the story and they didn't want to hear any more about it. I think Arrow nowadays is the modern day Project Blue Book. And actually, in this story that where I did a boots on the ground investigation in Puerto Rico, researching the 2013 Aguadilla footage leaker, that came out initially last year, and it just Ross Coldhart from News Nation was kind enough to cover this story with me. I just re-released the documentary for free on my YouTube channel at Occult Journeys, and we just cover all these anomalies that have been happening in the Puerto Rico region, like objects coming out of the ocean, objects going into the ocean, all around the island. And this UAP footage came from Department of Homeland Security. This is authentic UAP footage that even DHS themselves published papers saying, we're used to seeing balloons and all kinds of other things. This is something incredibly authentic as a UAP. But Arrow came out end of last year. They did their own press conference with just the director of Arrow and Senator Gillibrand. Very low showing for that. Susan Go, who's the Arrow sort of handler, she was present, and they said, none of these UAP videos are authentic, and in fact, the Aguadilla footage that was leaked is not authentic either. And I think that that's just a cover. I think that they're scrambling to explain things away that are anomalous now.
We're just going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about your latest production, but want to talk about disclosure and what you feel these UAPs really are. And do you believe in aliens? And we've got a lot to talk about. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back when We're Not Alone continues. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone, to this edition of We Are Not Alone. Darcy Weir joins us, an acclaimed filmmaker specializing in UAPs, UFOs, all things strange, and a psychic phenomenon. Lots to talk about. Darcy, your work regarding Puerto Rico and these triangles, and it appears the government's trying to cover everything up. What do you think these things, these UFOs are?
Well, I think there's evidence of encounters throughout history where these prove to be possibly non-human craft. The occupants seem to be non-human, so that could fall in line with the explanation of extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional. I'm open to this stuff, but when we see these things coming out of the ocean throughout history, there's also a researcher, Mike Masters, who published a paper with Harvard last year, and it was the crypto-terrestrial theory that maybe there's something that's been living in our oceans that is non-human, that has been here on Earth, but in a domain we can't usually reach. They're kind of on their own, and they've kind of watched us grow on land. I'm open to that theory too. I think that mainstream science is very closed off to these explanations, and it seems to be just rumors that to them, right? But I feel like with the upcoming congressional hearings where we're going to have people like my friend George Knapp testifying, we'll hear about probably the Russian reverse engineering program as George Knapp went over there after the Iron Curtain fell post 1990. And he learned directly from, high ranking military officials that the Russians themselves had their own crash retrieval program. And so I'm confident that there has to be something very different about these occupants that are on board the craft. I'm even open to the idea that they're us from the future, and maybe these are like our time machines coming back to view us on the timeline. It's possible. Why not?
Darcy, has anyone tried to stop you?
Oh, I've been harassed before, a lot on social media, a lot of comments that I'm who this or that. I think people love to throw around the G word, ends with a ER. But I'm just an honest researcher. I'm very compelled to tell these stories because I think there's something there. And, you know, there's a lot of guys that have tried to do the same storytelling. I feel like I do a pretty good job at it, and I'm going to continue to.
Do you know the law of attraction? Do you feel because you're so into this that you might attract experiences or encounters?
Maybe. I think you also have to be open to practicing, initiating that kind of encounter. And I'm not really doing that. I'm trying to raise like a 2-month-old right now
Yeah.
while producing these stories. So
Absolutely. Tell us about your productions, your latest one, The Psychic Phenomenon. Is there
yeah,
is there a psychic connection to UAPs and UFOs?
100%. That's what we hear throughout history. Experiencers, they're constantly saying that the occupants use telepathy to communicate thoughts, images, words, that type of thing. Sometimes people just see a craft and they have thoughts or words beamed into their head. So I think that telepathy, that psychic sort of connection to UAP and non human intelligence is there. In this recent documentary, The Psychic Phenomenon, where I got to sit down with Thomas Jane, famous actor from The Expanse, and Paul Smith, who's the DIA agent that worked on Project Stargate, Russ Targ, who started the Stanford Research Institute's remote viewing program, and then later on founded Project Stargate. you know, um, got to talk with people who've been practicing remote viewing, like Chris Ramsey, who has the Area 52 YouTube channel. I think he's a great guy, fellow Canadian, as well as Tracy Dolan, who many people don't realize she's a practicer of all this stuff, remote viewing. She's done all the practices, the uh, Ramtha mystery school type stuff. So I got a well-rounded explanation of what people think is going on, and then tracked the history of remote viewing, sort of ESP experimentation from multiple perspectives, including Tracy Dolan's, Chris Ramsey's, Joe McMoneagle, Russ Targ, Paul Smith, and Dr. Jeffrey Tarrant, a whole bunch of different, and the kind of the background forefather of ESP research, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14 astronaut. They called him the brain at Houston. And he carried out initial experimentation with Xena cards when he was on the in space, and got 90% effective ESP testing. So
Darcy, do
yeah.
you think that We're going to take a break here in a minute, but do you think that we all have the ability to have ESP or telepathy? Some of us are more in tune to it than others. I think some people are afraid of it because of the way they were raised or their religion, or they're too distracted to tune in and know that most of us have this ability, do we?
I believe we have an innate version of it. If you look at Rupert Sheldrake's research on this, he studied parapsychology and he had a book called Pets and Their Psychic Connection to Their Owners. I think it was something like that. He talks about how if you're at a mall and you're on the second floor and you're looking down into the food court at somebody at the back of their head, somehow psychically they have this instinct to turn around and connect eyes with you. I think that's something we all have. It's almost like a self-defense or instinctual psychic ability to protect ourselves from, when we were more primitive, living in a jungle or something, if a panther is trying to kill you. But obviously, there's people that are highly psychic. And I think the CIA, the DIA, and many intelligence agencies still employ those types of people. Heck, Paul Smith says that one of his clients is still an intelligence agency. So there are people that are highly psychic and they can do a lot more than that.
And I wonder if they can be taught that.
100%. I
Yeah,
think
interesting. We're going to take, Darcy, we're going to take a break. My producer's giving me the evil eye. So we're going to take a break and we'll be back right after this. Welcome back, everyone, to this edition of We Are Not Alone. Darcy Weir joins us. He is an acclaimed filmmaker. Darcy, let's talk disclosure. Is it coming? What do we need to know? How do we be prepared? And what message do you have? So is it coming? Disclosure.
I think we're living in the age of disclosure. I think my unpopular opinion is that really started post 2017 when Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon leaked those UAP videos to the public. And Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal did their bombshell article with the New York Times. I think it is a collaborative effort, though. I think my work is part of disclosure. I'm doing my part. I think these congressional hearings were more military officials and people from high-ranking positions within the government, them coming forward and talking about this phenomenon is also contributing to disclosure. And then people that have come before that, people that are experiencers, everybody's doing their part. Contactees, abductees, everybody's taking part in this. No one owns disclosure. It's a collaborative effort until we change the reality that we live in and there's an official capital D disclosure from a president or the government saying we're not alone.
It's interesting. So we're really already in it. That's what you're saying. We're already in disclosure.
I'd say so.
Okay. What have you learned through all of your work, and what do the rest of us need to know? Should we be scared? Are there lizard people or praying mantis people that are going to come after us? Are we going to be abducted? What have you learned through your research? What do you want us to know?
I think there's a possibility for all of that, of course, but I think, fear is a powerful tool to motivate and control disclosure. So maybe don't let that happen, but also don't go completely love and light and, try to run on board a craft if it lands, Be careful. I think everybody should be vigilant. And I'm joking, but also being serious and saying that, use your discernment, try to suss out the best truth, find the facts. And that's what I'm always trying to do too. That's my message.
Excellent. All right. How can folks watch your productions? How can they get in touch with you?
Sure. My latest films are on many different platforms: Apple TV, Amazon Prime, Tubi TV for free. You can just search my name, Darcy Weir. And then my social platforms, if you want to reach out or see some of the stuff I publish there, at Occult Journeys is my YouTube channel. I've got my Puerto Rico doc up there about the leaker and so on. And then at Occult Journeys on Twitter, I get into some Twitter battles and chat with people about my thoughts there. And yeah, also at Darcy Weir Films on Instagram, and you can add me to Facebook. I'm pretty easy to talk to.
Darcy, for people who don't believe, who think, what do you have to say to them?
Do the research. You know, if it doesn't interest you, sure, don't do the research. But if you want to be, part of the conversation, try to understand what's really going on. Go read a book and watch a film and look for the facts.
Darcy Weir, we're looking forward to watching your productions, and we thank you so much for joining us. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Make. It's really good to be with you today, and have a great day.
Thank you, you too. And to all of you watching, thank you so much for joining us here on Queen City News Plus. I'm your host, Make Bueller. We'll see you next time on We Are Not Alone.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.